You are listening to the Justice in Heels podcast with me, your host, Danielle Hayward. Join me as I discuss interesting legal topics with inspiring female legal professionals who paved the way for the rest of us.
Hello and welcome to the Justice in Heels podcast. Today I am joined by Helene Viljoen, who is going to tell us a bit more about social media and the law. Helene, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm a fan.
Okay, so before we start, can you maybe just tell us a bit more about yourself? What are your interests? What are you passionate about?
Sure, yeah. I'm Helene Viljoen, that part you know. I am an attorney, a lawyer, but normally when we say attorney or lawyer, people think old school. So I refer to myself as a new generation attorney. We're online in as much as possible. We're paperless, we're virtual, and we respond to a client base that is normally they're super urgent and it's tight deadlines, and people are much less patient than they used to be. So new generation attorney it is. My interests, I'm a nerd, super nerd. I'm a serial researcher, serial news reader, very interested in current affairs. I love playing piano, and I'm the mom of two and the wife to the world's kindest and most patient husband, Loam. That's me in a nutshell.
I love that. Okay, so firstly, can you maybe just tell us what are some of the common issues that you've seen people struggle with when we look at social media and the law?
It's like an alternate universe. So the crimes that we commit in person, we can commit them online, or the wrongs that we can inflict, we can do it online so much faster and without having to face direct consequences. So people have zero filters when they log on. Obviously, we've got defamation. People bad-mouthing one another on social media happens every single day. A few years ago, we had, who was it? Julius Malema, who called Trevor Manuel a nepotist on Twitter and got sued for defamation, had to pay R500,000. So there's a lot of bad-mouthing gone, a lot of insults, unfortunately, which people don't always realize it's actually a crime. It's called crimen injuria. So if your social media statement unjustifiably infringes someone's sense of dignity, they can take you to the police and you can get arrested, and you can get up to, I think, 2 years jail time is what Vicky Momberg got for crimen injuria. So that's quite crazy. Obviously, privacy violations. We've got people complaining about that left, right, and center. And revenge porn is another big problem when relationships go bad. It's actually been criminalized in the Cybercrime Act. People don't realize that. If you leak an intimate image of someone else without their knowledge, you can now get criminally prosecuted. We have a lot of that, a lot of catfishing. There's fraud online, millions and millions flowing out. I think it was something like 32 million rand that South Africa lost to cyber fraud in 2021. It's crazy. And if minors are involved, that's another horrible thing that we're seeing online, especially with teenagers. They're in a relationship, they exchange a few pics, they break up, and then when the revenge porn starts rolling, it's actually a criminal offense that is committed online quite frequently. Hate speech, the list is endless. I mean, if you think of the hate speech, especially for some reason in Pride Month, all the homophobes just go crazy and they think it's justifiable to discriminate online, which once again is a human rights violation. It could be a crime. Fake news, fraudulent pyramid schemes. I've had hacking of my friends' Facebook accounts where video footage has been created to make it seem like someone I know and trust is participating in a pyramid scheme, and then we find out it's been a cloned profile all along. So that's just the top 5 or 6 issues that we see online and on social media these days, and that's at the drop of a hat. There's much more.
Sure. Yeah, that's a lot. And I hope we can discuss all of these things that you've mentioned in a bit more detail. But let's start firstly with something that you mentioned, which is privacy. So, what misconceptions do you think a lot of South Africans have when it comes to social media and privacy?
Oh, that depends on who you ask. If you ask my grandmother, she'll be like, I can't post anything. It's just for the children, you know? Then she has a public profile and she's posting left, right, and center. You have people who, for some reason, think that if they put this typed up privacy notice on their profile, that nobody's going to share their stuff. I don't know if you've seen it. It's
Yeah,
usually
or that post where they literally say, I don't give Facebook any yeah.
Give permission for Facebook to share my stuff. Well, Gerda, why are you
Yeah.
sharing? But yeah, I think that's the biggest misconception is that people sign up to these things and they click, I accept the terms and conditions without realizing that that's where you sign your privacy right away to a certain extent. Is all the privacy privileges you give to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you give the moment you sign up for the platform. I'd say that's the biggest misconception. And then people think they can just harvest personal information online without it adhering to Poppy. We'll probably get to Poppy in a while. But I think it's people don't understand that the legislative and the regulatory framework is drawn up in the terms and conditions that you agree to when you sign up for a platform. You can't subsequently say, no, but it's private information if you've marked it publicly available, like your profile picture. So people make assumptions without reading the T's and C's. That's the biggest thing.
The moral of the story, read everything before you consent to it.
As a belief, read the T's and C's before you accept.
Okay, so then you also mentioned defamation. So can you maybe just explain to our listeners, how do you determine if something is defamation and whether something is just, sharing your opinion?
Yeah, that's a very, very valid point because you'll always have people saying, I'm allowed to call so-and-so an idiot because that's my opinion and I have freedom of speech. And people don't always realize that the section in our constitution that protects your right to freedom of expression actually says you have the right to freedom of expression, but sometimes you don't. If you go and check section 16, it says you can't use your right to speak freely in order to commit, for example, hate speech or to incite violence. And then we've got the defamation law, which comes in and says you can't unjustifiably defame someone in South Africa. And the way that I illustrate how this works is if you look at a newspaper, open up any newspaper, most likely there's going to be a crime story. There's going to be something that makes someone look bad. And that's defamation. Defamation essentially happens if I say something that makes you look bad. So in every single newspaper, you'll always find defamation because unfortunately bad news sells, but it could be justified or unjustified, lawful or unlawful. So the lawfulness lies in a number of defenses. If you get sued for defamation, you can bring up these defenses and you can win. The first is truth and public interest. So let's say you use social media, you want to expose a scammer. If what you're about to say about the scammer is both true and in the public interest, then it's okay to defame because that defamation is justifiable. If it's your opinion, if you watch the news on Putin and you come to the conclusion that this man, can I swear, probably not, this man is a nincompoop, and you want to say on your Facebook, Putin is a nincompoop, that opinion can be legally justified because it is your honestly held opinion and it relates to facts in the public interest. There you go, opinion justified. So those are two of the ways in which you can say your say online. It can be negative, it can be about someone else, but it will be justified. I think that's the big thing when it comes to defamation, is it must be fair, there must be good reason for it. Does that answer?
Wow, okay, that's a very basic description. I really love it because everybody is going to understand it. So thank you for that. So I mean, you've also mentioned Poppy, which I think is popping up a lot. A lot of people saying this is against Poppy, or remember to look at Poppy. But can you maybe just tell us, when we are looking at data collection on social media, what should, let's say, the people getting all of these data, what should they keep in mind?
What should they be doing? Well,
Yeah.
if you look at Cambridge Analytica, which I think is probably the best example of Facebook policies were a bit iffy when it came to private information. They didn't really demarcate what you couldn't do properly. So in comes these researchers that have to do with election and who publish content that influence elections, and they just grab the data of millions of people off of Facebook. And then that sparked huge international outrage. And since then, international and national regulators have really been clamping down and saying, okay, look, you can take someone's personal information, sure, but only under these circumstances. And that's where GDPR came in, internationally, and locally we have Poppy, which basically says that if I want your personal information and you give me consent to have it, you make it freely available to me, then I can take it, I can keep it, and I can use it. So long as I do so for purposes that I've communicated to you. And I think that's where people kind of lose the plot when it comes to Poppy. So I will put my personal information on Facebook and say, I'm looking for a nanny. If you can provide me with a nanny, contact me here. And 2 days later, I've got a pork company calling me on that number, selling me bologna. And that's not what I agreed to. That's what people don't realize, is when you give out your personal information, you give it out for a specific purpose. And in terms of Poppy, it shouldn't then be abused. Can social media platforms do more to regulate it? I think they can, but it will be a practical nightmare, which is why people should report any privacy violations to the information regulator. I think that would be more effective than reporting it to social media platforms.
Yeah, I think the problem with that also comes in that social media is something that we use worldwide, and obviously the laws in countries are not exactly the same. So something that may be a privacy violation in South Africa may maybe not be one in the US, for example. So I think that's also something that makes it a bit hard to really regulate everything that gets posted on social media.
Absolutely, jurisdiction is a problem. And if someone in the US violates my privacy rights, I have to travel there to sue them. And Facebook, for example, when you agree to their terms and conditions, as everyone has, then you agree to litigate in Ireland. So if you want to sue Facebook, you have to go St. Patrick's Day in Ireland. It's going to be a very expensive exercise. So yeah, the borderless law of our generation is becoming a practical problem, especially with privacy laws. You can go, however, onto Google. So let's say someone in Sweden violates your privacy rights and you are very unhappy, and they did this on social media. Then you can Google the privacy, the GDPR regulator in Switzerland, and you can actually institute a complaint there and they adjudicate it online. So it's possible, it's just going to take a lot of time, but you can do it.
I did not know that. Thank you for that helpful tip.
I did one the other day for a client in Latvia. So yeah, we were fighting IP. It was an IP related matter, but we fought IP and privacy in Latvia through the EU. Actually, they have a data violation portal. So that was very cool.
Okay. So can you maybe tell me, because like I was looking for someone who can tell me a bit more about Poppy on the podcast, but I really struggled to get someone. So can you maybe just, last question on this topic, but can you maybe just tell us, is Poppy, like, is it applicable to individuals and legal persons or businesses, or only on businesses?
Yeah, Poppy 101. So it applies to legal persons. It applies to me in my personal capacity, and it also applies to my business. all of us, we have to meet the same checklists when we deal with personal information. Do you want me to give you a rundown of the checklist?
Yes, please do.
Okay, so in terms of Poppy, I'm either a business or I'm a average Joe. I want your personal information. What does the law say? The law says I can ask you for it. You can say yes. I can only have it with your consent. Once I have it, I need to tell you why or before I take it, I need to tell you what I want to do with it. So let's say, Danielle, I want your personal information for marketing purposes. You say yes. Then I can have it, hold it, process it, rework it, as long as it is for marketing purposes. And you must always have the right to say, Helene, now I'm uncomfortable. Please remove me from your database. And then I'm supposed to do that right away. You can also update your details. And the big duty upon me as either a normal person or a legal person is to communicate to you what your rights are and how you can communicate your privacy expectation changes to me. So there must be an open line of communication. That's why every company needs a Poppy officer. So just to summarize, it's what do you want, why do you want it, and will you keep using it in accordance with those parameters? Then you should be fine.
Thank you for that. Very helpful. So, on the topic of cyberbullying now, can you maybe tell our listeners if they are the victim of cyberbullying, what legal remedies do they have?
Yes, don't take it lying down. I get so tired of people saying, I'm just going to let this one go. I'm just going to let this one go, especially parents. So the teenagers are tackling one another online. It is brutal. It's a digital bloodbath. And then the parents say, okay, well, we spoke to Pitty's parents. So no, take Pitty to the police, honestly. So you can go first of all to the police. You can open a case of, depending on the type of bullying, it could be assault, it could be intimidation, and it could be crimen injuria. Just to recap, crimen injuria is basically an insult criminally speaking. So you can open a court case if someone is bullying you, intimidating you, insulting you. You can go to the police, that's criminal. You can also go to the Human Rights Commission. And what I really love about that is the Human Rights Commission, they are there to protect our basic human rights. And they do so in it's a consultative process. So you explain why you feel your human rights were injured, and they then take it up with the person who hurt you and say, look, this is the victim's human rights, the right to dignity, for example. When you bullied her, you violated her right to dignity. Will you apologize? Can you learn something from this? Can we grow as humans from this human rights violation and move on? So the Human Rights Commission always try to mediate. If it doesn't work out, then you get what happened to Penny Sparrow, for example. I don't know if you remember a few years ago. Yeah. When she compared Black people to monkeys in a tweet, and the Human Rights Commission fined her in the end, found her liable for hate speech. So you can go to the police, you can go to the Human Rights Commission, and then fabulous, the Protection from Harassment Act. If it gets really nasty, you can go to your nearest magistrate's court, you fill out a form, it's called an application form in terms of the Protection from Harassment Act. On this form, you write down how you've been harassed, you attach screenshots, you attach WhatsApp messages, whatever the case may be, and you then fill in this paperwork and you hand it to the clerk of the court, who gives it to the magistrate, who can make a court order prohibiting the bully from harassing you again. And if that bully does it again, they get arrested. This is such a powerful tool. It's a court order that you get in 1 or 2 days based on your evidence. And the bully actually gets ordered by court to stop. So they get another chance. They're not arrested immediately. They're given the chance to fix their ways. And if they don't, then they can get arrested. Then also there will be a return date upon which the bully can come and explain to court why the interdict against them, the court order against them, shouldn't be made permanent. So those are 3 really effective solutions: police, Human Rights Commission, and Protection from Harassment Act.
I think it's also necessary to mention that all 3 of the options that you mentioned just now are very cost effective. Like it does not, you don't need to be super rich to actually
You don't need
pursue
a
these
lawyer.
remedies.
You can literally do it yourself. You don't even need a lawyer. It's that user-friendly, and it's free. Court is free, Human Rights Commission is free, police is free. So do it.
Yeah, do it. So you've now mentioned or given advice on what to do if you are the victim of cyberbullying. But I now want to ask you, can you maybe give a few tips to parents of teenagers or people themselves to
Yeah.
actually protect themselves before, like, to prohibit themselves from actually being the victims of cyberbullying? Like, how can they actually protect themselves?
Oh, it's so difficult in these times we live in, but where we start, where I normally advise families who come to me, is keep a close eye on your friend list and your privacy settings. You can actually make your social media profiles as private as possible, but then you're going to have to go into the settings and demarcate it so that people who aren't your friends, people that you don't trust, can't follow you, can't comment on what you say. The other thing is, don't respond to incitement. If someone's trying to incite you online or on a media platform, contact them privately if you feel the need. Otherwise, try and abstain from responding, but that is difficult, and that will depend on the scenario that you're dealing with. Other ways to keep safe online in a world where you're bombarded with bullying is, I would just say, confide, especially for families and parents, confide in someone, find someone who you trust, so that the moment you realize a conversation is going downhill, this could result in potential bullying. Confide in someone you trust, go to an adult for help, speak to a friend who's really wise about life. They'll probably tell you, detach yourself from this correspondence and go on with your life, focus on the positive. So that's not a very legally helpful solution, but we are being bombarded with a problem, and sometimes unplugging the beast is the best you can do.
Definitely. And this is also something that I say a lot on the podcast. Like maybe sometimes you don't even need to follow a legal route or have a legal remedy. There's like normal lifey things that you can do on your own without an attorney to actually save yourself from all of this harassment. And yeah, so that is
Yeah.
the great thing. Now I want to ask you, what do you, or how do you see the social media law changing in the next few years? Or how do you hope it will change in the next few years?
I think before I want to reinvent the wheel, people need to learn what the wheel looks like and how it works. There are so many laws that are actually so helpful in the social media space, but people don't tend to think about old written laws as something that could apply to the digital society. So I would say step one is just become wise on the laws that are already there, because they're really, really helpful. I would, however, like to see copyright legislation amped up so that it gives more protection. Because yeah, when it comes to copyright, people don't realize that the moment I make something creative, if I take a piece of paper now and I write a smiley on it, that thing is copyrighted. That's how copyright works. It's like this, boom. The moment you create, there's copyright in the creation. So you can't just go onto Facebook and steal everyone's intellectual property and their beautiful professional photos and share it to the world for your own advantage and then claim it's public domain. Because people abuse the word public domain. Public domain is a very technical copyright word. It doesn't mean because it's on Facebook, it's mine. That's not how it works. So I think I'd like to see copyright legislation amped up, and I'd like to see media regulation just, I think the existing rules, and especially like the press code, for example, they do such a fabulous job of applying to online challenges and online times. People should just wise themselves up on the rules and the regulation that already exists. I think that the Cybercrime Act is a good thing in that it criminalizes revenge porn. So no improvement suggested there. I did see a very interesting thing, though, with the Criminal Procedure Act. Do you remember a few years ago, Nicholas Nino, the Dross rapist?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So his face was blasted all over the internet before he even appeared in court. And very interesting, the Criminal Procedure Act says, normally if you, let's say you're work in the media or you're a blogger or citizen journalist, and you want to identify a wrongdoer, normally you can identify them once they've appeared in court. But in terms of the Criminal Procedure Act, there are two exceptions. Sex offense accused and extortion accused cannot be named before they've pleaded. And it's just whack in the Nicholas Nino case, how his face went viral all over the web before he pleaded. But that, in my opinion, highlighted that the Criminal Procedure Act needs to be updated. So I'd love to see that, because I don't think these two exclusions make any sense. That's my humble opinion. And I think in the online era where communication is key, I think lawmakers can revise that. But other than that, I think if we can just educate people on the laws that are already there, that would be great.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today and sharing all of these wonderful tips with the listeners.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, so can you tell our listeners where they can reach you?
Yeah, please. So my name is Helene. That's Helene, Viljoen Incorporated. That's the name of the law firm. Helene Viljoen Incorporated. You can find us on Facebook. That's where we share most of our publicly available legal tips for the man on the street, saving you a possible attorney consultation. Helene Viljoen Inc. on Twitter, Helene Viljoen Inc. on Instagram, and we are also actually on Stupid and Upwork. So if you have any legal issues and you like a quick opinion, you can check us out there.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Justice in Heels podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to share it with your friends on social media and tag us. As this podcast has a legal element, just a quick disclaimer that all views expressed in this podcast are not necessarily the views of the firms, companies, or brands that we are associated with. Until next time, goodbye.